I've called one of the smartest strategists alive, and I'm pitting him against one of the smartest AIs alive to see which one can save you.
I call this true but utterly useless.
These debates can definitely have a bit of a sting.
If you work behind a desk, whether you're a lawyer, coder, consultant, or anything else, your job is being eaten by AI. Sangeet Paul Choudary is a strategic genius who has advised CEOs at more than 40 Fortune 500 companies, as well as pre-IPO tech firms. His new book, Reshuffle, is about how AI is changing systems of work. And ChatGPT is trained on more knowledge than any human in history. I'm pitting them against each other to redesign the future of work and see who can save our jobs from AI. Here's how it works. ChatGPT and Sangeet will get the same prompt and debate it out. At the end, a mystery judge and industry leader will decide the winner. You won't see this judge until the very end, but this scale will reveal which way they're leaning as we go. So judge, give us a wobble so we can see the scales working. Great, thanks. So it's man versus machine. Which of them will save our jobs? Here's the prompt. AI is disrupting every desk job. How do we save them? ChatGPT, you're first.
Absolutely, Dino. So if we want to think about how to save desk jobs in the face of AI disruption, the answer isn't to resist AI. It's to embrace it faster than anyone else. Think of AI as a calculator for knowledge work. The people who picked it up first suddenly look like geniuses compared to those still doing math by hand. The same is true now. If you're in marketing, learn to generate campaign drafts with AI. If you're in finance, let AI crunch the first pass of reports. If you're in HR, use AI to screen resumes or draft policies. The simple shift is this. Stop seeing AI as a threat and start treating it like a personal productivity sidekick. That way, instead of being replaced, you become the person everyone else looks to for how to work smarter. Because, as the saying goes, AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will.
Wow, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And right now, we're seeing CEOs force their staff to use AI. In fact, the CEO of Coinbase actually laid off everyone who wasn't using AI in their workplace. So Sangeet, AI is disrupting every desk job. How do we save them? What's your response?
Yeah, I actually agree with some of what ChatGPT said, absolutely. The answer is not to resist AI, it is to actually adopt it. But I don't necessarily agree with the line that AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will. When we say AI won't take your job, but someone using AI will, we are sort of assuming that jobs are very static, fixed entities. To understand how AI transforms work, we need to understand that the tasks that we perform are typically part of specific workflows where those tasks from various sources performed by different players across the organization come together to create value. Those workflows are organized inside organizational systems, and those organizations in turn compete inside competitive ecosystems. So when a new technology comes in this specific case, when we think about AI changes not just the tasks and how the tasks are performed, but AI changes how companies compete in the ecosystem as well. And when AI changes how companies compete, the skills that are required change in response to that. Take the example of the legal industry. Traditionally, you had junior workers who would create sort of the base of the pyramid of value creation inside a legal firm. They would do a lot of the work associated with contract drafting, with clause drafting, and so on. A lot of those things can now today be rented on demand as an AI capability. And when that capability is unbundled from the labor and the skill and the training that needed to be in place for that knowledge work to be performed, and that capability is now available as a rentable capability, the logic of how you structure workflows, what work sits inside the organization, who gets to perform it, all of those logics change. Somebody with lower organizational context sitting outside the organization could perform it if the right context could be served to them as an AI capability. Meanwhile, somebody with lesser skill or somebody with a different set of skills could perform the same task, but the role that they perform could be fundamentally different because they just bring together a different set of skills in this new workflow. When workflows change, organizations change in terms of what they do inside versus what they do outside. And when organizations change, they innovate around these workflows to find new ways to compete in the ecosystem. And that's what we see, for example, in the legal industry. We now see smaller legal firms coming up which do not require that same base of junior workers. We see a shift in the rules of competition where firms are thinking about not just billing by the hour, but billing in terms of outcomes. And this logic. So when we think about the system of work, tasks, organizations, and how ecosystems and competition work, this logic works the other way as well. Because once firms start changing how they bill for work, they effectively start changing how they compete. In response, other firms will have to change what kinds of capabilities they want to have internally in order to effectively compete, which then in turn changes the workflows and hence the tasks involved, which changes the nature of jobs that would be required within that particular firm. So it's this constant reshuffling at all these three levels of tasks, workflows and organizations, and competitive ecosystems that really changes the nature of jobs. It's not just AI's impact on the task, but AI's impact at all of these three levels that determines which jobs and which skills associated with those jobs will be required in the future.
So, what do you say to that, ChatGPT?
Yes, workflows and ecosystems will evolve. But those shifts always reward the workers who adapt fastest at the task level. If AI can draft a contract, summarize data, or generate a report, the person who knows how to direct and refine those outputs will be more productive than their peers. And when organizations restructure, they'll keep the people already fluent in the new system, not the ones waiting to be retrained. Think of it like surfing. The wave will reshape the entire shoreline, but only the surfers already on their boards get to ride it. That's why the simplest, most practical step today is to start using AI yourself, because productivity and individual competitiveness are what keep you valuable while the system reorganizes around you.
So what do you say about people learning tools and skills that may ultimately become eliminated because the entire system around them changes because of AI?
Every skill eventually shifts or fades. Shorthand, film developing, even driving someday. But the people who kept learning new tools stayed relevant because learning itself is the transferable skill. Mastering AI today isn't about betting on one tool. It's about proving you can adapt, integrate, and outpace. Think of it like learning to swim. Even if the pool closes, you'll still know how to move in water. AI fluency signals you're someone who can ride the next wave, whatever form the system takes.
Yeah, Dina, again, I agree with some of the points that ChatGPT makes in the sense that we are entering, or we are already in a world where learning is your most important advantage. But I do still feel that this assumption that people who learn the new tool set first or adaptability across tool sets, it still is a very tool focused view of saying that if you're good at the tools, you'll figure out the way to move forward better than anybody else. The fallacy over here is that it's true, but it's not very useful. I call this true, but utterly useless in the sense that I don't disagree with what it's saying. You need to keep learning the tools, but it's not very useful because learning the tools is necessary. It's not sufficient. In order for us to evolve our jobs and to spot opportunities more broadly, because the very concept of jobs will change, to spot opportunities to grow and to be productive in an age of AI, we need to look at the overall system in addition to being proficient in the tools. Proficiency in the tools is not sufficient.
So Sangeet, if the entire system around tasks and the jobs that hold them change, how do we figure out which tasks and which jobs become valuable?
I think a simple rule of thumb is when you're thinking about what you should be doing to stay relevant, don't look at the tasks that AI cannot perform yet. Look at what AI breaks in the system. And then as the system evolves, constantly look for what AI breaks in the system. So if you're able to spot those breakdowns before others and you're able to skill yourself towards it, that helps you stay relevant as you move forward. We need to look for what are the constraints which are valuable in the system. So when we think about constraints in the system, there are typically three different types of constraints that we see in any system of work. There are constraints related to scarcity, and traditionally, knowledge work has always been structured around constraints related to scarcity. Finding good, well trained legal professionals or legal work professionals was scarce. Not everybody had access to that training, and it needed significant levels of skills for you to qualify for certain types of jobs and to do those tasks well. So, a lot of knowledge work was scarce, and with as AI improves, several forms of knowledge work and the ability to access their performance becomes less scarce. So the traditional constraints of scarcity go away. We still need to look for what skills are scarce in the new system. That goes without saying. But there are two other constraints that we should also look for. There are constraints associated with managing risk. In any system of work, ultimately you need to get the work done, and some forms of work have risk associated with it. And there's a very interesting example we see every day, the case of the anesthesiologist who administers anesthesia in the middle of operating procedures. And a lot of anesthesiologist's job consists of tasks that are actually performed by machines. And yet the job exists and is highly paid because the job is structured around managing the constraint of risk in a high stakes setting like inside an operating theater. And so, even though the tasks can be performed by machines, the job exists because it manages the risk based constraint. A similar constraint exists around coordination. And similarly, when technology gets adopted at different paces in different parts of the organization, there are coordination breakdowns that happen, and whoever comes and steps in to solve those coordination problems can have very high value in the new system that emerges. When software as a service SaaS tools started coming up in the early 2010s, we started seeing two things happening together. First, consumers were connected to businesses because of the mobile internet, and so there was a lot more complexity associated with managing the customer journey. In response to that, many different tools came up to serve every part of the customer journey. And what ended up happening was that the software tool landscape became highly fragmented, and teams started using very specialized tools for specific points in the customer journey. So marketing teams had their own tools, sales had its own tools, support had its own tools, and nobody was working across this. So there was a coordination breakdown that happened. And in response to this, a new role was created of revenue operations or RevOps, whose sole purpose was to manage the customer journey end to end and ensure that the customer value was maximized while coordinating across all of these different teams. So traditionally, this role would not have existed, but as tools came up to make individual execution of tasks faster and better, the coordination constraints increased and new roles emerged for that. And that gives you some clues about what to expect with AI, because both risk-based constraints and coordination-based constraints will increase as organizations adopt AI. So I'm not saying that you don't go after the right skills, but you need to see what skills are right as the new system changes, and you need to combine that with figuring out which constraints you're resolving in the new system, because that is what will give you the ability to command value in your role in the new system.
Wow, that's really interesting. ChatGPT, what do you think?
Yeah, these debates can definitely have a bit of a sting. Learning AI now keeps you close enough to the shift to see what breaks and to be the one who builds around it.
So let's bring in our judge who's been here all along and listening behind the scenes.
Thank you, Dino. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sangeet and ChatGPT. I'm Pete Dalcamara, former chief scientist at Kimberly-Clark, R&D executive at Dow Chemical, and really someone who spent my entire career at the intersection of science, business, and human potential. My job today is to cut through the noise and ask the questions that matter most. So Sangeet and ChatGPT, you both have made compelling points. So to Sangeet, a question I have for you is, if workers can't predict how systems of work will be reorganized, how do individuals, especially Gen Z just entering the workforce, position themselves today so they don't get blindsided when the systems transform?
What's most advantageous for Gen Z today is not to be overwhelmed by the tools. Yes, adopt the tools, embrace the tools, but shift their focus away from the tools to really see how the work that they're aligning themselves towards, how is that changing? How are the industries changing? How are new firms in that industry fundamentally different from the traditional firms that used to be there? So start developing a really good radar for how the system works, how competition is changing, which kinds of fundamentally new jobs appear, even if those jobs are not of interest to you, and build your hypotheses on that basis and constantly keep revising them. The key point is, don't resist the tools, adopt them. The tools are not the savior. You cannot ensure your success by focusing entirely on tool usage. You have to think about what's changing around you and how that leads to new opportunities, not just within organizations, but even entrepreneurially.
Wow, thank you, Sanjeev. What great advice, not only for Gen Z, but for all of us, right? No, thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. Turning to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, you argue that learning AI tools now keeps people relevant. But how do you ensure that skill isn't just a short-term advantage that disappears once the system reorganizes?
Pete, the memorable way to look at it is this. Learning AI tools isn't just about today's tasks. It's about building a habit of adaptation. When you jump into AI now, you're not just gaining a single skill, you're training yourself to evolve as the system evolves. In other words, you're becoming the kind of person who's always ready to pivot. It's like a jazz musician who learns one instrument but can pick up another because they've mastered improvisation. That's the sticky idea. By embracing AI today, you're not betting on one short-term advantage. You're practicing the art of continuous learning. And that's what keeps you relevant, no matter how the system reorganizes.
Well, thank you, ChatGPT, for that thoughtful answer. You know, as I really listened to this whole conversation, in the end, the real winner here is the listener, because the future of work won't be saved by one voice, one system, or one tool. It will be saved by how we collectively choose to adapt, reimagine, and lead. You know, this isn't really an easy decision to make. You know, both really believe skills are important, but as we know, skills must be learned in the context of a changing system and with the emphasis on lifelong learning. If I must pick a winner, I guess I lean toward Sanjeev.
Awesome. Thanks so much, ChatGPT, Sangeet, and Pete. That was a fantastic debate. If you really enjoyed what you heard today, you can check out Pete's book, High Tech Heroes, Why Gen Z is Our Last Best Chance to Save the Planet. And also check out Sangeet's book, Reshuffle, which dives deeper into our conversation today. And if you want to support our work, please subscribe and share. It really helps a lot.